let's kick things off with today's keynote. So, Josh Wentz is a product management leader at Google TV. He's a professional instructor at UC Berkeley Haas School of Business. Graduated UC Berkeley's Haas School of Business product management program. Has an undergrad from Penn State in architectural engineering and internet science. And Josh's passion is to make the home that you live in as smart as the phone in your pocket. So Josh's keynote is consumer versus enterprise products. What can they learn from each other and AI? So let's welcome Josh.
Hi everyone. We're going to go through, I'll go through a bit of an intro today. I'm going to go through this difference between consumer, B2C, and enterprise, B2B. I'll go through a bit of the past, the present, and then the future. First off, I want to thank Paul and thank Maddie and all the coordinators for this. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak. Like Paul said, my name is Josh, and currently work at Google. So I'm going to go through a bit of an intro that Paul already did this, but this is a quote I came up with in college, and I think we all have certain passions and something that drives us. And I came up with this quote in college because I was studying architectural engineering and internet science, and friends were so confused at the time. This is like back in 2007. They're like, why would you major in both of these things? It doesn't make sense. So I came up with a quote, and it was, I aspire to make the home that you live in as smart as the phone in your pocket. And you'll see throughout my career, I really focused on that to make sure that buildings become smart and they leverage the internet that we have today. A bit of a background about myself. I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So I am from the East Coast here, but now I live out in San Francisco, the Bay Area, and work out there. This is kind of a smattering of different logos and places that I've grown up kind of moving from. My undergrad from Penn State and the product management work that I've done at Berkeley on the left side there. Right out of school, I worked at ANSYS. Then I moved to Chicago to work for an architecture firm. I worked in Atlanta here, actually for GE, an IT leadership program. Loved Atlanta, really fun place, happy to be back. Then I moved to Philadelphia, worked for the Department of Energy as a software engineer there. Then I was pulled out to the San Francisco Bay Area, where I started with small tech. So a startup called buildingwest.com helped raise and sell that particular startup, which was kind of talking about digital twins before there was even a word for it. So I'll kind of walk you through that history and how fun it was early on and where that product is today. And you can buy it still today. And then I moved on to big tech at LG Electronics and now at Google. Across those, there's kind of four main areas that my experience crosses, and that includes consumer, enterprise, academia, and government. That's way too much to talk about in one particular speech though, so we're just gonna focus on the consumer and the enterprise. And when I say consumer, and when you see that consumer circle up on the screen, I mean B2C, or business to consumer. So I really loved hearing Jason's speech with Colgate. Think of Colgate when you're thinking consumer. A lot of Google products fit in that consumer space. But Google is also moving into enterprise. So I heard Google Cloud Platform as well. That's completely enterprise and B2B on the right side there. But a lot of B2B enterprise companies here. So what I wanted to do today is I'm going to kind of break that down and based off of my own experience, what are some of the strengths of both? How can the enterprise side learn from the consumer side? How can the consumer side learn from the enterprise side? And kind of strengths throughout that. So this is the timeline, and this is kind of the last one were logos in terms of companies. These are some of the products that I focused on at the Department of Energy. If you guys are familiar with Energy Plus or Open Studio, some of my early software engineering work was there. And then more recently on the consumer side, so the bottom there is showing consumer, and the top is showing enterprise. LG ThinQ is a smart home app. If you guys got a washer, dryer, refrigerator, that app will control all of those devices. And now more recently with Google TV, and I'll kind of describe why that is. But like Paul said, I'm a product management leader at Google TV, but I'm also a professional instructor and coach at Berkeley's Haas School of Business for a product management program that they had, and really helped me actually get into Google. So I'm really passionate about that particular experience. I did want to plant a seed in the similar way that Paul did at the very beginning And what I did is I typed into ChatGPT, this is the title of the speech, Consumer versus Enterprise. What can they learn from each other and AI? And I just typed it in, I said, well, what would that description look like in 100 words? And that's what it looks like on the left. And my actual description that you can see on the website is not that far off. So it was kind of creepy, just in fact, how good ChatGPT is. And this is just one of many tools that I'll illustrate a little bit later in terms of how AI can help your various companies. So what we're going to do today is we're going to learn from consumer versus enterprise their past. Like there's a bit of a parallel you'll see between the personal computing industry and digital twins today. So we'll talk about that, how we can help each other in the present across B2B and B2C, and then how we can evolve with AI to evolve more effectively and serve our markets more in the future. I loved hearing that from Paul at the very beginning. Like AI isn't being mentioned that much across the conference speeches, but there will be so much more. And I'm going to introduce an AI pyramid as to how your companies might be able to get there if you're not already there today. So I'm going to start with a kind of a definition, a baseline. I've already described what consumer is, what enterprise is, but a really confusing part that's happened more recently is this overlap has become very blurred, and over time it's really expanded. So I have this overlap because throughout my own experience, building OS, and that stands for building operating system. It was like buildingos.com. The whole goal of that was to kind of take the physical space and bring it online. But that was a full enterprise B2B product. We only sold to other businesses. Google, LG, and GE, through my own experiences, while my work was on the consumer side, for most of those, they crossed both of those. So there's this blur and there's this like confusion, I think, within the market. But through that, you can leverage kind of the best of both worlds. This is how my own product experience kind of pans out. You get consumer with LG ThinQ. ThinQ is just a fun word that the headquarters in Korea for LG had come up with to mean AI. That's kind of like LG's AI smart home app. And ThinQ Energy is for solar panels. Fun fact, LG is kind of second to Tesla in terms of solar panels. But we worked on a solar panel app, and that's available in the App Store today. What we're going to do, though, and really want to focus most of that time, I'm going to be coming back to this several times throughout the presentation today, around the strengths of both worlds. Having that experience in B2C, B2B helped me in kind of elevating what are the top strengths across these two different industries. And from a consumer side, these strengths have been there for a long time, but there are different ways I think different companies such as yourselves can leverage that. Design, marketing, UX, onboarding, and content are some of the biggest strengths on the B2C side. And some of your companies might already be great at that, but there might be a bit of room for improvement for that. And on the opposite side, enterprise, they're fantastic at scaling, at support, at security, and also customizations. A really fun fact, while I work at Google, Google's good at certain things, but not at other things. So I don't know, how many of you have wanted to call Google if you have a problem? Because it's near impossible. You're like, I've tried to do it. I work at Google as an employee, and I literally can't call anyone, even as an employee, to get help on any particular product. And where my mind is, having experienced both of these worlds, is that consumer and B2C can learn from enterprise, and maybe offering tiered pricing models here. Maybe offering a way for people to pay for support if they wanted a bit more support. I just think that's a really funny thing that I've experienced through Google, and it's something that you'll see throughout the slides today. So one of the big focus areas I've seen in both consumer and enterprise is both focus on quality. Through these product lifecycle management softwares that we've all seen and through the vendor booths today, quality it needs to be top of mind. It really, as you think of the amount of data that all of these softwares are creating, if you're not focused enough on quality, you will lose your customers. And if you look at both Google TV and Building OS right here, my experience with Building OS and digital twins, before we had a word for it at the time, we had this area called data trust that I really encourage you guys, if you aren't working or thinking about this particular space within your company, really think about how your customers will care about the quality and accuracy of that data. I'll give you a quick example. BuildingOS.com was rooted in a college project with dashboards that help dorms compete on who's spending the most energy. So as a college student, you're like, oh yeah, it was all about peer pressure. How can I beat my neighbor and spend less energy? But then when we moved from building dashboards to building OS, we brought in this dollar amount. Your utility bills are now brought into the same places that you have sub-metering. And as we started to show dashboards of this, we realized if you're 3 kilowatt hours off, nobody cares. But if you're 3 cents off, if you're 30 cents off, all of a sudden, I, as a customer, don't trust your data. But normalizing data across all these buildings that's a really hard problem. So think of data trust. How can you make sure that that data has high quality and also high trust? On the Google TV side, we focus a lot on performance, making sure that quality is really important. I wanted to start to introduce what I call this AI pyramid. This is from my own experience in both consumer and enterprise. And think of this as the foundational pieces that you might need to get to that top triangle of artificial intelligence. At the very bottom, you've got computing. You've got servers, you've got sensors, you've got different hardware. Kind of the layer above that is data collection. That could be logging, that could be sensors, that could be integrations. Layer above that, you've got data storage. You've got databases, pipelines, infrastructures. Above that, we have data analytics. We've heard a lot about data analytics over the past, this entire presentation. Then you've got data science with different simple algorithms and models. And everything above that also is considered data science. But I added this layered element to it so you can see how can I move up in this particular pyramid. Machine learning is really about neural networks, deep learning. A way for you to remember, like, what's the difference between machine learning and data science, because it was hard for me, is that machine learning typically gets better with more data. It can self-improve itself. A lot of basic algorithms, data science, and models don't necessarily do that, but machine learning does. And then at the very top, you've got artificial intelligence. And there's a reason I have Building OS peeking out at data science, and then Google TV peeking out at artificial intelligence. And at the very bottom of artificial intelligence, and I'll show you why in a little bit. A lot of these presentations were just talked to you, and I want to make sure that you guys are engaged with it. So the reason that I wanted to split everyone up in these various tables is there's a bit of a surprise. We're all multitasking, and I was honestly very guilty of multitasking myself on my phone or on my laptop. But what I want to do today is I like surprises in speeches. I like to really get everyone out of their comfort zone a little bit. So below each of your notepads, there's a bit of a surprise for this company called UGears. So feel free to open whatever you got underneath your notepad there. There's a few pieces underneath. And take one of those small pieces. I want everyone to have at least one of those small pieces in their hands. And throughout the slides today, we're going to do a bit of a small activity, wake everyone up, get moving, get talking to each other. And let me talk about this particular company, because I found them so interesting. First off, I have no affiliation. Google has no affiliation to this particular company. Think of they're called UGears. And the reason I wanted to introduce them today is that UGears is, for one reason, to support, I think, a really challenging part of the geopolitics of the world is UGears, actually U actually stands for Ukraine. So in UGears, they're actually still developed in Ukraine. So that's one way to kind of think of that and support that particular Ukraine moving forward and succeeding in that particular concern of the world. The other is, think of this as kind of an object to fuel your imagination. I think we were all kids one day. We're all adults with suits. Right? We got a tie on right now, but we were all kids one day. Can I have a raise of hands? How many people love Legos growing up? Like, played Legos all the time? And I was figuring this would be the highest hand raise, because we got lots of engineers, including myself. And I wanted to plant the seed of UGears because this is just a brand new toy that kids can use moving forward. And like I said, think of it as an object to fuel your imagination today. And we're going to connect the pieces throughout the rest of the presentation. I want to plant the seed because I'd rather you do a bit of multitasking with this, kind of feeling like a kid again, as opposed to on your phone or as your laptop. And I did the same, so I was guilty as well. So as I speak today, feel free to talk to your neighbor a little bit, feel free to whisper a little bit, or just figure out if you can make something with those particular pieces. So it's a bit of a challenge for each of the tables throughout today, to think creatively, be a kid again, and see what you can make. And by the end of the slides, we'll kind of reintroduce which table might have the most exciting one. So I want to first start off with the past. Starting with kind of that intro and consumer versus enterprise, this inspiration, I wanted to take us way back. And in my in my description, this part was actually not by ChatGPT, luckily this was by me. There's a part of the summary of the slide today that said there's a bit of a parallel between the digital twin industry today and personal computing. And I'll map out what that looks like and why I think that is the way that it is. And I'll kind of go through what you're looking at here. So on the very far left side, this is really the history of personal computing. There's a lot more history here, and I'm really picking and choosing certain pieces. And there's three major companies that I'm touching on. Everything that you see above on the green line there is all enterprise. Everything you see below and the blue line and below is all consumer. So B2B above, B2C below. And there's a bit of a history here that I just wanted to illustrate it because I want to make sure all of the companies here continue to evolve in a way that certain companies that you're seeing up here might not have evolved as quickly. So IBM introduced its very first personal computer, and it was Microsoft's MS-DOS at the time, in 1982, with about an 80% market share of computers. That's crazy. That never happens today. But 80% market share is just wild. 2 years later, Apple introduced the Mac. And at that time, they only had a 4% kind of computer market share there. Move forward almost a decade, you've got Microsoft releasing Windows 95, developing MS-DOS. Apple launches iMac in 1998. And that I, if you're curious, stands for actually internet or individual. So the iPhone, iMac, if you look back at the branding of that, was internet or individual. And the reason I bring this up is it was a really important inflection point of a new technology that Apple adopted immediately. The internet was, I like to say, almost born in 1989. Tim Berners-Lee wrote Information Management Proposal, which is where HTML, CSS was proposed, HTTP, all of the modern technologies. So the internet is only about 34 years old at this point. But Apple was one of the first to leverage this with called the iMac. At the same time, what's not shown here is IBM and Microsoft took a lot of time to adopt the internet. They tried to reject the concept for a while, and I think it took a big toll on the market share as you look a little bit later on. Just like a few years later, Lenovo ended up acquiring IBM's PC business, so they went from 80% market share in 1982 to 6%. In 2006, that's a big drop in IBM and Windows. And I'll kind of illustrate how we might want to change that as you're looking at your own B2B company. Apple introduced the iPhone, that changed the game in 2007, continuing that internet concept and that internet focus. And now jump all the way to 2023 today. IBM is really mostly consulting. They do a lot of software. They completely divested their hardware business. So Lenovo IBM with Windows is about a 24% market share, but it's actually shrinking if you look at that year over year. There's a lot more competitors. And actually Apple, if you look at the next generation, Gen Z, millennials, most of them have MacBooks in college. And they're eventually going to go to work and continue to want to use that particular MacBook. So Apple got a 57% market share of phones, which is wild, that's crazy. Nobody has that high today because of the amount of companies that exist. And Mac has a 10% market share, which isn't that much higher. And it's definitely lower than IBM, but it's growing. And I really want to look to the future here of how much that is growing and to think of that. Why I was illustrating that past is over time, B2B did learn from B2C. IBM, Microsoft, Windows, Dell, and HP, some of them have beautiful laptops today. But that took decades for them to get to that beautiful industrial design. And they learned from the design, and they learned from the UX at Apple. And I really challenge and encourage all the B2B companies here to do the same. I want to touch on a few more things. One is the history of the Internet of Things. And digital twins really means nothing if you don't have the internet, in my opinion. I'll talk about the history of digital twins as well, but the Internet of Things history really had an inflection point in 2011. In 2011, what you see with the red numbers here are mentions of the Internet of Things in publications. Consider this a proxy as to how much people are actually talking about these buzzwords. A lot of buzzwords that we've heard throughout the conversation and throughout the conference today. But over time, the Internet of Things really ramped up with how often people are talking about it, 2011 is the first time that 1,000 publications, research publications, talked about the Internet of Things, or IoT. I want to fast forward now to the digital twins. Digital twins is a little bit earlier. It's a bit newer than the concept of the Internet of Things. And it wasn't until 2019 that there were 1,000 different mentions of digital twins. So some of you might not have a history in technology, and those that might not, this is just something to be aware of. There are a lot of new buzzwords, they're always coming up, but again, it wasn't until 2019 that there were 1,000 mentions. And if you look back a bit, there are over 12,000 mentions of the Internet of Things in publications in 2017, and we're still at only about 1,000 here for digital twins. So what we're talking about at this particular conference, a lot of people aren't yet talking about it. But it's important to kind of expand that. And if you look through the history of this, is why I think this is so interesting. This goes back to 1991. There was this concept, the word of mirror worlds. 1999 is when IoT was coined. Mirrored spaces and models was what was talked about in 2002. 2006, information mirroring model. And 2010 is where digital twins was first introduced. So digital twins aren't that old. You think of the internet being 34 years old, we're at like, terrible at math on the fly, 13 years. Yeah, like 13 years, digital twins, not that old. So it's got a lot of evolution, it's got a lot of room for improvement, and we're gonna kind of talk about how we can do that. I wanna talk about this because it hasn't been talked about much. We talked about digital twins, but I think digital twins without the Internet of Things is a concept. It's like a really pretty idea, I think. The internet and the Internet of Things made it possible for you to take that physical world and make it virtual, make it alive, give it a pulse, just like a human does, which is one of the inspiration pieces for building OS. These are some of the key technologies I think that were really important with digital twins, with IoT. One of them is Dassault Systems, which is here today, which I thought was exciting. I did not create this particular graph. This graph was created in 2017 by the source of IoT One Index. And there's a few I added before that. So GE PIDX was launched in 2011. Building OS, which is a startup that I was a part of. We didn't talk about digital twins because the word didn't really exist yet. People weren't talking about it. That was launched in 2013. Then if you jump 4 years later, 2017, there were only 3 companies that they're highlighting with more than 1 year in 2017 of digital twins. You got Dassault Systems, which is here. Fantastic, they've evolved even since then, which is exciting. You got GE and you got Ansys. There's many others that I'm sure that are not shown here, but it was just really interesting to kind of see how important the combination of digital twins with the Internet of Things and IoT is for your company. So just as a reminder, this is my own past. I was really honored to be reached out by Maddie and the conference coordinators. I'm like, I never joined a conference before. Why are you reaching out to me? And I started to put the slides together, and I was like, oh, I did work at Ansys. I did work at GE. And then the startup was a really fun experience to kind of take the physical world, make it virtual, which then goes back to that same theme that excites me. To take that, like I said, I've always aspired to make the home that you live in as smart as the phone in your pocket. We started with enterprise first. So if you look back at this history of personal computing, enterprise pioneered the computer. IBM had 80% market share with the computer, primarily selling to enterprise. Over time, though, IBM's market share has decreased and the consumer has increased. And I use this as a lesson for those in the digital twin space to start to learn from B2C as quick as possible so that you can evolve. You can move very quickly. I want to jump to what building OS is, just so you guys have a bit of a history of that. And I'll jump way back to my schooling. In undergrad at Penn State, I had 2 degrees, architectural engineering and internet science. And there was this concept at that time called Building Information Modeling, or BIM. If you guys are familiar with the construction world, I'm sure many of your softwares will actually do something similar. This was a project that we did, and I was going to list all of the softwares, like some of the slides did yesterday, but there are at least 20 softwares that went into this concept of the building information model, taking that physical building, and I did the one on the right, the HVAC system, and I had an electrical or structural, I can't tell fully, did the one on the left there. But you have each system of a building like the systems of a human. So you've got the respiratory system or the HVAC system, the nervous system or the electrical system. So there's a bit of a parallel. Any parallel you can have with digital twins with the actual biology, I find just fascinating. So what Building OS was, this is again launched in 2013. We went through Series A, Series B acquisition, post-acquisition, that whole roller coaster. If you guys have watched Silicon Valley, how many people have seen Silicon Valley, the TV show? Okay, all right, we got a lot of those. So I had to stop watching that show because it felt like work to me. Like my own experience in building OS, I literally had to stop because all of those people exist in Silicon Valley where I live today, and I just had to stop. So what building OS was, is we brought up all of the data. Like each data set was a puzzle as to how to bring it up online. We brought in weather data from various clouds, utility bills, utility metering data, and we had this consolidated view. And I think we'll share these slides afterwards. You're welcome to take screenshots. On the left here is buildingos.com, and when we launched, this was 2016, was the launch of this particular version of buildingos.com. It originally launched in 2013, and then we had a brand new version that had two views. We had a portfolio view, so you can see all of your buildings, and that's in the upper left up there. And then you've got the building profile, which was really inspired by your Facebook profile or your LinkedIn profile. We wanted to give a personality to the building, which was so much fun to do and was really illustrating the concept of digital twins. So anytime you can be poetic and really express your digital twin in a way that maps to biology or human physiology, it was a fun launch at that time in 2016. BuildingOS.com has since been, we were acquired by a company called Acuity Brands, which is actually from Atlanta. So I'm happy to be back here in Atlanta. We had some conversations through those acquisitions, and now they acquired actually a few other companies. BuildingOS focused on energy management. Locust Labs was a company that focused on mapping yourself throughout a building. A lot of their clients were airports. They merged those two concepts into what they call Atrius.com. So if you're curious in managing that particular assets that you might have, Atrius.com is a way of doing that. And again, those designs look super similar to what we launched in 2016. The designer's still there, they're still doing incredible work. I want to go back to this AI pyramid though, because Building OS peaked in this AI pyramid. And the reason we peaked, and this was mind-boggling to me whenever I found this out. If you look at the source, you'll have the slides afterwards, but the source on the bottom right is from Google Brain. So Google Brain is Google's AI group and research group. And with the leader of the Google Brain group, when we were working on Building OS, made the comment, he's like, for you to have machine learning to work well, for you to have AI work well, you need 100,000 examples of something. 100,000. Building OS at the time, 2016, 2017, we had 15,000 buildings. But those 15,000 buildings were all different. So we didn't have 100,000 examples of one particular process. So we couldn't really exceed this level of machine learning. I just wanted to bring that up because as you're thinking about your own digital twins, as you're thinking about your own software, how can I get 100,000 examples of something? So that pattern is good enough to train machine learning, good enough to train artificial intelligence, so that all of your slides will also be talking about AI as Paul did in a year or two from now. Think of that 100,000 examples, because the Building OS peaked out. We couldn't get above that. We were really recruiting and obviously getting more clients, but we never exceeded that 100,000 example. I'm sure they have. It's 2023 today, so I'm sure they've exceeded that, and hopefully they have. Building OS learned greatly from B2C. And this is how we learned and how we thought about it. We wanted to learn from the design, the UX, and the onboarding of B2C. We were really good at scaling. We were really good at support. If you call Building OS, you're going to get a person. Not the same at Google, but at Building OS, you're always going to get a person on the phone. And we had a fantastic support team. But we wanted to really absorb design, UX, and onboarding. I think this is a really important slide because I've seen there's a lot of wonderful softwares and engineers in the room, and so many people love Legos as I do myself. But I don't want to understate how important designers are. I had this conversation with I think Compliance Quest. They hired some illustrators to make some beautiful designs. And really, the reason that we had wonderful design, UX, and onboarding, the professor that created Building OS, it was started as a college project, decided to hire an engineer over here, and he decided to hire a designer from over here. Having that cross-disciplinary intersection is what made Building OS both functional and beautiful. So I really encourage all your companies to do that. We got to this place where eventually we grew and sold the company. A lot of the original team decided to move on, including myself. And where I wanted to go, because at this point we created digital twins with commercial smart buildings called Building OS, and I wanted to do the same residential. And the closest for me, my favorite, well, you got Alexa, you got Apple Home, my favorite was Google Home. I was a Google fanboy since college. My friends used to call me Mr. Google Docs, which is like, they didn't know what it was at the time. I was like, this is the future. I'm not gonna email you an attachment. That's the past. I'm not gonna do that. So I wanted to work at Google. I did not get hired. I interviewed 3 times before I got hired at Google. But I did get hired at LG. And at LG, I was really fortunate to be able to work on this relaunch of LG ThinQ. If you get, any of you have an LG refrigerator, washer, dryer, microwave? We've got a lot in the room. If you're not using the LG ThinQ app, I definitely recommend using it now. So 2020 and before, so before I joined that particular company, the LG ThinQ app looked like that on the left. That's a real screenshot of the LG ThinQ app. It's a smart home app that you can control all of these devices. So it was a really consumer smart home. In January 2022, that was kind of the 2 years that I was at LG, we launched a brand new version of LG ThinQ, and we cleverly used this quote, "Life's good at home," because that's really COVID time, and we spent a lot of time at home, but we really spent a lot of time on improving what the app is. The one big piece of information, I'll plant the seed up here, is we learned a lot. You can see these favorites at the top. People love choosing favorites. We did this before Google Home even did, which was really very encouraging for me to do that at LG before. And we also have content that's included here. So content is everywhere now, but you have to create quality content. And we decided to create quality home content and integrate it with your smart home work. And this is a quick screenshot of that solar panel app as well. LG ThinQ pulled from B2B. We spent a lot of time on what does support look like. LG actually implemented what Google should do. They haven't done it yet, which is tiered support. You could pay for a bit more support at LG ThinQ if you need some help with your various products. And we also have customizations with those favorites. So that was fun. At this point, I really I moved from LG to Google, and there's this study, the American Time Use Survey, which the US Bureau of Labor Statistics runs. And this is just a fun fact. The top 3 places that Americans spend time. 1 is sleeping, average of 9 hours, that's a lot, I wish I got that much sleep. 2 is working, which is 4 hours. This is a crazy number to me, why only 4 hours? Those that are CEOs might want to look into that particular number. And then 3 was watching TV. And I learned 2 things at LG. One is that TVs were the most engaged device in the smart home, which is like, I want to make an impact in the smart home, where do I focus? I didn't know, is it the speaker, is it the hub? In my opinion, it was the TV, which is why I moved from LG to Google TV, because the amount of time that people spend, 3 hours per day, if I can make that easier for people around what to watch, then we can really make a great impact. So I'm going to bring you to the present at my time at Google TV. I'm going to go through these slides pretty quickly. I work a little bit on Google Home, mostly on Google TV. 2 taglines: Google Home is your home in your hand. Google TV, everything you stream all on one screen. I'm planting the seed for learning from marketing as well, from consumer and B2C. They make incredible stuff. This is our October 2022 launch of Google Home. And I showed you the slides, and you're welcome to review the slides later on. You can Google Home launch of 2022, and this is what it looks like. You can see favorites in the upper left. They're learning from the customizations that I think B2B has, and all of your devices. Everything about this is just visually beautiful. Design and UX was just paramount with Google Home. And the reason I bring this up is if you think of the history of personal computing, I want all the B2B companies here to succeed. I want you guys to learn from what consumer is doing, and so we can help each other. This is a screenshot of Google TV. If you guys haven't heard of it, the big benefit of Google TV is it will take all of your apps, so you don't have to think, where's Friends? Is Friends on Hulu? Is it on Netflix? You just have to talk to your TV, I want to watch Friends. And it'll say it's on Hulu or channel 35. And you can jump to that right now, as opposed to scanning. The other thing it does is it personalizes for each person of the home. So this home page here is creepy good. It's all like too good. And this uses very much machine learning, artificial intelligence, because we have over 100,000 examples of different TVs and engagements with various people that have used this. And I want to go through some of those things. Personalized entertainment. Anytime you're working on work, different software, think about the personalization of it. Fun fact, if you Google any TV show right now, there's these two bubbles right now. You got watched or watch list, and you can add that to Google TV watch list. That will show up both on your TV and on the mobile app. So this has been so much fun to kind of build that out. We got a virtual remote, so you don't like lose your physical remote. You can take your phone out and start controlling your TV up, down, left, right. We got the very beginnings and much more smart home to come for viewing that Nest camera. And there's a lot of active learning right now at Google about scaling. Google TV is scaling to have a lot more OEMs across the world. We just recently announced 150 million active users of Google TV, so it's really increasing. We had a presentation with the CEO, Sundar. He's like, this is my favorite new Google product, uses it all the time. Probably because it's the third most amount of time that Americans are spending time on. You got work, you got sleep, and you got TV, so it's not a surprise. At this point in the present, I wanted to kind of express other things that might help as I've gone through this. These are different product management learnings. A lot of you are making product lifecycle management. These are certain learnings that I have learned through my time teaching at Berkeley Haas. And feel free to use this in your own company for any product managers that you already have or are hiring. I like in the software world, a lot of my focus has been in software. There are kind of three functional superpowers. Product focuses on words, design focuses on visuals, and engineering often focuses on code or hardware. And I'm going to go through my favorite frameworks that we teach at Berkeley, that we use at Google, that I use at the Building OS as well. My favorite design framework is called design thinking. If you guys aren't using this yet, I definitely recommend doing it. It's the simplest view as to how you can develop software. You start with problems first, diverge and converge, and then move to solutions. But the most important part of this that goes into the best framework for product management is ranked problems. You really want to focus on your ranked problems before you move into ranked solutions and list it out. All of my product requirements documents, both at LG, Building OS, Google, all look like this. And the reason for that, if you come into a room with a bullet point list, people are going to start telling you things you don't care about. I remember the CEO of my startup said once, I just don't like the color purple. I don't know, I was like, this is unhelpful to me. I don't want to hear about what color you like and don't like. I want to know what's most important here. So stack rank those things. I tell every student I work with at Berkeley, stack rank everything. Because it helps get the best opinions from the leaders, because they've got a more macro view from a product management perspective or engineering perspective. You might have a more micro view. So put it down a draft, what the ranked problems are. But always start with those problems, because there's less opinions. People always have opinions about solutions, not as much on problems. Scrum and Agile was mentioned a few times yesterday, which I loved hearing, and I just wanted to plant the seed here as well. My favorite framework for engineering is using Scrum and Agile, using sprints. This is a view of like an abstracted view of what LG, Building OS, and Google looked like when I joined and we started to implement these different features. Backlog refinement, sprint planning, you got stand-up, sprint review, and retro on a weekly basis. So we have this weekly cadence that's the most important part. Getting that structure in line with any software team is the most important part of what you can do. I'm going to skip through these really quick. I'll touch on them, which is there are three different types of product managers we talk about in Berkeley: a 0 to 1, a 1 to 100, and a 100 to 150. And these are some examples of my own experience in that. And if you want to learn more about that, read the book from Peter Thiel's 0 to 1. He'll talk a little bit more about that. And feel free to ask me more questions about this. With just a bit of time left, I want to jump into the future, because I've talked about the past, I've talked about the present, and I want to talk about the future. And I want to start with a dinosaur that at Google we have right at Googleplex, at the headquarters. And every time I have friends or family visit, I take them to show them this dinosaur. And Larry and Sergey, the founders of Google, they put this in the very middle of the headquarters. And they did it because if you look at the dinosaur, we always say, I used to be a tour guide in college, so as I'm walking backwards and like pointing at different things about the dinosaur, the reason I did this is, if you as a company are not constantly evolving, you will become extinct. I get chills when I think of that, because I want to repeat it again. If you as a company are not evolving, you will become extinct. I showed you an example of IBM divesting their hardware business because they didn't evolve fast enough. They didn't integrate design and UX fast enough, as I encourage many of your companies to do. And Google Larry and Sarah are constantly reminding us of that, because dinosaurs didn't constantly evolve. A lot of other animals existed at that time. They evolved. Dinosaurs went extinct. So I want to ask the question, I want you to use the different pieces that you've made on the table today. How can your organization evolve for the future? Which of these words are most important? I want you guys to take a pen, if you don't have it already, write that word on a piece of paper, write that word on that U-gear that I planted there. Which of these are most important for your company to improve upon and evolve to make sure that you're changing for the future? If I were to write this down myself, these are a few areas that Google really needs to improve upon. The support is terrible. We need to improve upon that so much, and people will pay more for it. So Google Home needs to improve on their customizations. There's more to come with that, but they definitely need to do that. Google Home could also integrate more smart home content, as LG did. I want to go back to this AI pyramid just as an example, because as you're building up your AI infrastructure, your AI expertise, think of this 100,000 examples. Building OS didn't have 100,000 examples at the time that we launched and before we were sold. We eventually did. Google TV has 100,000 examples. How can you get 100,000 examples to evolve quickly as a company? So there's a bit of a top of the pyramid here that we peek out at. And the very top of the pyramid, it's purposely blank up there. And I'll show you why in a second. But right now, we peek out at what we call artificial narrow intelligence. Artificial narrow intelligence is what you see with all of these tools. So ChatGPT is just one example. But if you guys are interested in using some other tools, feel free to take a pic of this. You got text from both ChatGPT and Bard. Bard is Google's version of ChatGPT, where you can ask it anything, and it can give you anything in response. But there are other wonderful tools. Adobe Firefly was just talked about on the Today Show earlier today, around taking any image and creating it, so you might not have to hire someone. You've got voice, music, video, and that's just the beginning. This is all artificial narrow intelligence though. One of my favorite parts here is like, what does AI of tomorrow look like? Of 10 years from now look like? There are two top areas that often aren't talked about, but are really at the very top of this AI pyramid. This is a bit small, so I'll just describe it. You've got artificial narrow intelligence, which is where we are today. Artificial general intelligence, which means that AI has versatility. They can learn and adapt from experience in the same way that humans can. And then you've got artificial superintelligence, which is a bit scary, but that's when computers might have beyond human capabilities. So that's the future. That's what that looks like. I'm excited about that future, and I really plant the seed for all of you today to learn from B2C, learn from B2B if you're a consumer company, and learn from AI. Hold on to that particular piece. Feel free to take home those pieces that you have. And the reason that I wanted us all to feel like a kid again, like not just be in suits, but also get excited about really what we used to get excited about with Legos early on, and have some fun. So take those pieces home. Those pieces are a way to connect you all for this particular experience, this conference, and also remind you of the people that you might have met here throughout the conference, which has been really a joy to get to know of and to join in. So thank you guys so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it. We're out of time for questions, but I'll be here all day, and you're welcome to ask me questions anytime. Thank you, everyone.